much too complex, too complex, much too complex, too complex, too complex, too complex.
Good afternoon. My name is James K. Holder II. Some of you may know me as Sir James II, and I'd like to welcome you back to Not on My Watch. As always, I'd like to ask you to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this post. I want you to retweet this and repeat this. One of my big goals within the next month is to reach 1,000 subscribers on this YouTube page. So if you have a YouTube account or a Google account, I'd really appreciate it if you just take a second right now, press that subscribe button. It'll really help me out. One thing I want to do is expand to a pure audio podcast, and I can do that once I get 1,000 subscribers on this page. So some of you have been asking for that, and that's something I want to build towards. So please help me reach that goal soon by subscribing now. If you're watching this, it is Wednesday, April 5th, 2017. And before we even get started, I want to give a special shout out to Senator Jeff Merkley, the Democrat from Oregon, who, as of right now, is probably still on the Senate floor, holding the floor in objection to the appointment of Neil Gorsuch, Trump's, of course, nominee for the Supreme Court. So I want to give a special shout out to him. He started his filibuster in the evening of April 4th. It was about 6:47 p.m. and he's still going. So kudos to you. And keep in mind, this is a pre-recorded show. So that's that. Speaking of April 4th, on this day, 49 years ago, America witnessed a great tragedy in the assassination of the Honorable Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And I wanted to start today with just a little bit of text from one of his speeches that I thought was just super relevant to today. I'll try to read quickly. This is an excerpt from a speech entitled, or a sermon rather, entitled The American Dream. It was given at Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is right down the street from my studio here in Atlanta. And it was on July 4th, 1965. And just the excerpt I want to say is, the American dream reminds us, and we should all think about it anew on this Independence Day, that every man is an heir of the legacy of dignity and worth. Now, ever since the founding fathers of our nation dreamed this dream in all of its magnificence, to use a big word that is psychiatrists use, America has been something of a schizophrenic personality, tragically divided against herself. On the one hand, we have proudly professed the great principles of democracy, but on the other hand, we have sadly practiced the very opposite of those principles. But now more than ever before, America is challenged to realize its dream. For the shape of the world today does not permit our nation the luxury of an anemic democracy. And the price that America must pay for the continued oppression of the Negro and other minority groups is the price of its own destruction. Yes, it is. For the hour is late, and the clock of destiny is ticking out. We must act now before it's too late. And so it is marvelous and great that we do have a dream, that we have a nation with a dream, and to forever challenge us, to forever give us a sense of urgency, to forever stand in the midst of the isness of our terrible injustices, to remind us of the oughtness of our noble capacity for justice and love and brotherhood. And this is actually one of many speeches, sermons. This book is highly recommended. It's a knock at midnight. I recommend this to everybody. And yeah, get this book. It has many of his sort of lesser known speeches and the bigger ones and some of the letters. But it's a really good compilation that tells a bit more about the mind of Dr. Martin Luther King. So I highly recommend that to anyone. But yeah, I think what King's legacy was about, we talk about these types of dreams. We have the I Have a Dream speech. We talk about the American dream. And I really believe that in what he was talking about there, King's dream had been realized in sort of ebbs and flows. A flow would have been significantly the 2008 election, where we, as a community of voters, as a mobilized block of change makers, worked towards a common goal and elected Senator Barack Obama, then President Barack Obama, to be the 44th President of the United States. It doesn't mean that Barack Obama himself was the dream realized, but it was a core value of democracy for Barack Obama to be the winner of that election. We were able to unite behind someone. And I want to discuss briefly just the jewel that is the black electorate. There's a reason why there is so much aim at black voters. Whether it's politicians who pander to us, whether it is people who say that, oh, black voters always vote the same way, or just the systemic efforts to disenfranchise people of color, and specifically black voters from the franchise. There's such a concerted effort, and you have to ask yourself why that is. Why is it that from every side, whether it's white liberals, whether it's the GOP, that there is such an effort to keep this voting bloc stressed out and separated and divided? And I just want to kind of briefly go over that really quickly. I had a particularly embarrassing moment yesterday. And this was sort of precipitated by a Twitter interaction with a white tweeter who was sort of discussing politics in a way that I didn't appreciate as a black man. This person basically said Hillary Clinton would have won had she supported Black Lives Matter. And again, people who don't support Hillary Clinton will say she doesn't support anything, that she's the most evil person of all these things. And I think there's one thing about having an opinion, but I think when you're someone who doesn't experience the fear of living in black skin, to then, as an external voice, to speak in to our community, and as a white man who 75% of white men did not vote for Hillary Clinton. Let's say that. You could say that 60 some odd, probably 65% of them voted for Trump specifically, but then you got to factor in the Johnson voters, the Stein voters, the write-ins. A lot of white men simply did not vote for Hillary Clinton. So for someone in that demographic to then blame us for why this person didn't come along, or Hillary Clinton, who paid, in my view, considerable deference to the movement, considerable deference to the issues, despite the past of her husband's, and really everyone in government was tied to the 94 crime bill and a lot of that stuff. So I just think that we can have our opinions, but sometimes some conversations should be left within our kitchen table. And if you don't understand that, it's better sometimes as a white viewer or a white ally to simply listen and learn from our experiences rather than sort of interjecting this view. So long story short, this person, things were said, I got kind of live, I got put in Twitter jail for a little bit, and it was just kind of I wouldn't say that I lost control, but in my rant, it was about a series of 20 tweets that were just really, even for me, they were assertive. And one of them made reference to someone who I really feel is a victim in this. And I want to take this moment to humbly apologize to Miss Erica Garner. I don't want to mention the tweet. If you look it up, you'll find it. She lit into me so heavy. And it was one of those things where, again, in the whirlwind, I just kind of put out a set of statements. This particular comment was about the juxtaposition of Erica Garner via the Sanders campaign versus the mothers of the movement in the Clinton campaign. And so I think at some point, we have to get beyond the politics. We got to get beyond the petty on my end and focus on the people. And really that a large part of what happens within politics, in the attempt to get the black vote, there's a lot of exploitation of our pain. And so Erica Garner is a victim in all of this, and I pride myself on being someone who, one, focuses on people, gives everyone an opportunity, provides a safe space for everyone, and I feel like in that instant, I wasn't providing a forum or any protective stance for a woman, let alone a black person, let alone a victim of police brutality. And so I humbly apologize to you, Ms. Erica Garner. I tweeted you, just to say I'm sorry, and I deleted it, but it's out there. So I just wanted to make that very clear where I stood on that. I made a mistake. I will own up to that. Eric Garner lost his life at the age of 43. My father passed away 25 years ago at the age of 44. I wear this tie today in honor of both of our fathers. This is his tie, and I don't have a lot of things from my dad. He passed away when I was 7 years old. And so we have so much more in common than we have that separates us. And I don't believe that there's so much daylight within what we want for our country that we can't put aside the noise on Twitter and the name calling and this and that to really sit down and say, okay, I might not like everything about Bernie Sanders, but if you won the nomination, I would have absolutely voted for Bernie Sanders. I might not like everything about Hillary Clinton, but if she wins, if she gets the nomination, I'm gonna put everything behind her. And I really wish we were able to maintain that fortitude. And I feel like as a community, I'm moving off of this topic now. As a community, we were divided by external factors. You could say it was Russian bots, you could say it was anything, but I feel like at the end of the day, if we sat down, we would see, and by the way, white people, you see this unilateral pitch to one side, typically in elections. Most black people coalesce around one candidate. There is no forum, there is no meeting that everybody meets up, or there's no tweet, there's no group chat that says, oh, vote for Hillary. That doesn't happen. People come to their own conclusion about who they want to support, typically based on, I know historically I don't want to support this party and what their agendas are or what they've been a part of. And then you say, okay, it may always boil down to a lesser of two evils situation for black voters. I think in 2008, one thing that was significant was that Barack Obama presented a very specific, exciting component to an election that we had never seen before. And so it was very easy to enthusiastically line up behind Barack Obama. And there were naysayers, of course, but it was enough to get it through. The way that the electorate is changing, specifically within the Democratic Party and the Democratic primary process, is that 45% of the Democratic electorate is black people, basically, when it comes to a primary. So in general, because we vote so closely aligned, it's typically 80% in one direction. And because the demographics of the country are browning in a way, black voters will ultimately are the gem, because we will always be the determinant of who the popular election winner, the popular vote winner is in elections. We're always going to basically determine who the primary nominee is for the Democrats. And we're always going to be the one, and because of that, once you determine who the Democrat is, it's always going to be statistically based on voting, history. We're always going to be the popular vote choice. That was the case for all of the last elections except the re-election of George W. Bush in 2004. And so I want to just kind of put that out there. That is why we are so targeted when it comes to advertising, and why people, really come at us and these trolls come out. And that's all I'm going to say about the trolls, because there's a lot to talk about today. But, again, I can't apologize enough. I grew up without my father, and I could only imagine how much actually worse it is to have lived with your father, in your life, and then to lose him in such a public way. My father was a public figure as well, and so I don't wish that on anybody. I don't wish that pain on anybody, and I certainly understand your pain. And I just wanted to get that off my chest, because that was not good. Let us talk about Potholes in politics. Now, something really interesting is happening in the city of Atlanta, also the birthplace of the Honorable Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this is last Thursday. Everyone across the world heard of this, the bridge collapse of I-85. And this is sort of the most tragic thing that can happen to a place like Atlanta, because it is a transportation hub with, the busiest airport in the world. It is a huge, bustling metropolis, and it's also, suffocated by traffic. Everyone knows that is the worst thing about Atlanta. The traffic is absolutely terrible as it is, and so there's a very specific significance of the way that this collapse happened. And I'm not going to get into the accusation that 3 crackheads started this fire. Anyone who has driven through Buckhead and has taken those back roads, the Beaufort Highway Connector, knows that there's been this pile of rubbish under that bridge for well over a decade. You drive past it every single day. There's round up coils of stuff behind a fence, and it just sits there. It's never moved anywhere. It's never gone anywhere. And that became the kindling for this massive fire that has now basically disabled both directions of traffic on the I-85 corridor as it splits from the downtown connector. Why is this significant? John Ossoff is running as the replacement seat to flip the 6th in the 6th Congressional District. The beginning of the 6th Congressional District is at the mouth of that split between Georgia 400 and 85. That is where that breach happened in the bridge. This means that people in the 6th Congressional District are experiencing considerably more pain with this particular issue. And what does that mean? It means that it's very easy for any politician or any voter to align the consistency in government to a political party. And in this case, it would be to John Lewis of the 5th District. Now, mind you, remember months ago, before he was even in office, when Trump threw those jabs at John Lewis in the 5th District about crumbling infrastructure. I mean, maybe that was like the damning words. He called it into existence, because now we literally have this crushing traffic situation in our state. It won't be fixed for at least a year. Regardless of what anybody says, this is not going to be fixed until within at least a year. And it really is bad for that community. But in tying it to Kasim Reed and John Lewis, who are both so closely tied to Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party, and John Ossoff is endorsed by John Lewis. And you have this room for many of the voters who, in that race, you're counting on these reliable conservative voters. In the election, Hillary Clinton, I believe, lost the 6th District by 1 point, which in Georgia, again, is kind of crazy, right? But it does make a big difference. So it's close, but no cigar. You still need enough of these people to flip. And if it's a reason that that rang out in their minds, and they can tie Ossoff and the Democrats to crumbling infrastructure and the opposite of what Trump talked about, he kept saying crumbling infrastructure, it could be the death of this candidacy. So I want to say there's a lot of polls out there that say Ossoff is on top and Ossoff is this and Ossoff is great. And I want to just tell you, don't count your Ossoffs before they hatch. What you can do right now to support and make sure that this man gets elected to flip the 6th, this is a big deal as a part of the resistance movement, is to, one, follow John Ossoff at Ossoff, OSSOFF. You can also visit his website, electjohn.com, and donate. That is crucial. And I want to say that the best thing about following him on Twitter is that he really, you get sort of the culture of what his campaign is. You get a little vibe of what he is. And they kind of go farther into offering details of like how to sign up to do phone baking, how to sign up to do canvassing, how to volunteer and really get involved. On the first day of voting, Alyssa Milano was driving around basically being a free Uber ride to take people to go vote. And so, again, with this current traffic situation, not that it's necessarily going to impede people in the process of voting, but it very well may and will, it's going to be important that we band together, carpool, take people to the polls with you. If you know people in your neighbors in the 6th district, get them to go to the polls with you. Set a date. I don't care if you go for coffee and then go to the polls. Do something. Pokemon go to the polls. Whatever Hillary is trying to make happen. Let's keep that alive and make that work because it's significant. And for people who don't live in Atlanta, I can't really explain it via every city, but let's take New York. The significance of the breach of this bridge collapse, it would be the equivalent in a subway in New York of if every single train skipped 14th Street as a stop. If that were to happen, if because of construction no train stopped at 14th Street, except the L still ran on 14th, how would that change your route? Yeah, if you're going from Harlem to Bed-Stuy, it's not going to affect you at all. But if you have to switch, depending on, most parts of Harlem to Bed-Stuy, you'd be unaffected. But it's just, you would be really, really, really screwed over by this one gap in service. And it really is impacting the culture of the city. And we're about to be Ghostbusters 2 with a big bulging, river of slime floating under us of rage, because I can tell you I was out there in the streets and it was not anything nice. Moving along to out there in the streets, let's talk about Kendall Jenner, shall we? This was something that kind of popped off late in the evening, and it was a bit sad because I want to like Kendall. I feel like Kendall is sort of the Kardashian clan. She's sort of the one who we watched her growing up. That can't be easy, right? And I remember watching her say that she wanted to be a model. I remember her starting her modeling career and not liking it, facing the challenges of realizing it wasn't what she thought it was going to be, and yet she still sort of pushed ahead. Yes, you could say her momager, greased the wheels on stuff. You could say that her social media buy-in really helped designers flock to her as a face for their brand, but that's still her value to add to their brand. So I want to give Kendall credit for what she's been able to do and how she's been able to build a serious career from the access that she had. That's anything to commend. But at some point, I wish I wish all of them were more responsible with their voice. I mean, I think Caitlyn was very disappointing to many of us when she decided that she was going to endorse Donald Trump, despite all of the transgender bathroom laws and all that nonsense that the GOP was supporting. That that was really disappointing to watch. Kim and Kanye also, being bitten by the Trump bug. I just think it's really weak to have such a voice and to know better and to not do better, to not do what you needed to do for people, especially so many people of color who follow you and, everything that your brand means. It's just sad. The recent infraction of Kendall Jenner's Pepsi commercial. And by the way, again, shout out to Atlanta, shout out to Coca-Cola. No one drinks Pepsi. It's really a terrible product. But, Kendall Jenner is the face of Pepsi now, and they take this protest approach. And they basically appropriate the photo of the beautiful black woman in the sundress who became the face of sort of Black Lives Matter and the resistance and just speaking truth to power. And it was compared to the man standing in front of the tank at Tiananmen Square when this woman in this light dress with strapless is standing in front of the guarded police, and they're terrified of her. It really was a powerful statement. And for that to be sort of taken by a white person, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. How you have these external voices that come in and just stir the pot. whether it's to distract or confuse or upset or whatever, it just ends up being this really painful exploitation of our pain to sell something, right? To gain something, to get something, to squeeze something out of the black community. And that's something that's just really, that really should stop immediately. Twitter was not having it. Black Twitter wasn't having it. White Twitter wasn't having it either. I saw all kinds of memes, so you could check that out. If you just search Pepsi on Twitter, it was live. Facebook too, it was live. So that was, a lot had been going on. I could get into the further attacks of black women, Trump's accusations against Susan Rice, more deflections, Trump donating his first quarter salary from being the president to the Parks Service, which he basically gutted to nothing as one of his first acts. I think it's just sad. So I'd be remiss if I didn't loop back to something that happened last week. Last week was a very special episode on racism. It was just the Racism 101, Racism for Dummies, just breaking it down. And we talked about just the problematic, how problematic it is to have these powerful voices in the media like a Bill O'Reilly on the O'Reilly Factor, saying such defamatory statements against black women in power like Maxine Waters. And so I am happy to report that as of yesterday, 22 companies have pulled ads from his show. And these include, but are not limited to, Hyundai, GlaxoSmithKline, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Coldwell Banker, and Allstate. And so kudos to those companies. There were many more companies, and a lot of it was just, there was really such an outrage about the statements and how obviously painful and hurtful they were to women, specifically women of color. And I'm glad to see that there was enough of an outcry to get a financial pinch on that white power, that to say, you know, this, we're not going to support this, we're not going to be a party to this. And so that is very important, that's very significant. So keep, you know, when stuff comes up, you have to say something, you have to speak out. And that's why, again, I just have to thank Erica Garner for calling me to the carpet, and boy, did she call me to the carpet. That I don't get dragged very often. This was a significant dragging. And while I don't agree with you politically, it is important that we respect each other. And so I never want to be that voice. I never want to be that person that is using a male expression or a majority vote something as backing to oppress anybody or try to silence anybody. And so that was never my intention. But including with the 22 pullings of those ads, Don Lemon, kudos to Don Lemon, because he definitely pulled that wig off O'Reilly in his tweets to Bill O'Reilly. Don Lemon basically said that he refused to cover the Susan Rice story because he was not going to continually flood his viewers with fake news. As you can see, I've kind of shifted a little away from the Trump shenanigans in coverage here, but and I think you'll see more of the responsible journalists doing that, to just stop focusing on the distractions and just stay on point with the Russia hearings and all the stuff that's coming up, and the filibuster of the Supreme Court stolen seat appointment. We have to remain focused. And in the tweet, I'm going to pull it up because I do not want to misquote this, but it was a good one. This is about 10 hours ago. Bill O'Reilly, CNN's Don Lemon refuses to cover Susan Rice story. Then he links it to the story. Don Lemon quote tweets this man and says, "False, I did not refuse to cover the story, but I did cover your sexual harassment allegations. Did you?" And this was 10 hours ago. It has 51,000 retweets. I mean, 51,000 likes. So yeah, that was a significant clapback. The clapback king is Mr. Don Lemon. So that that was powerful. I want to lastly thank our friends to the show. Today I am thanking Brandon T. of Atlanta, Georgia, for your contribution. Of course, if you want to contribute to the show, you can send a donation via PayPal at paypal.me/jkh2. And that will help me either, if you send $1, I will shout you out on the show as a friend. You'll help me buy coffee for the next episode. I appreciate any support because it's really just about building a community, building a table where we can all have a seat and a platform, and having an alternative media source that caters to what we really want to know about and what we want to hear. And so that I'm eternally grateful to all of our friends of the show. Thank you, Brandon. And also, another way to contribute is to Ask James. At any point in time, if you want to DM me at JKH2, and I say send me a direct message because if you message me if you at me on Twitter, I probably won't see it. There's just a lot going on. But if you DM me, I'll always typically see it and I'll reply. But just at JKH2 or at Not On My Watch TV, you can ask me any question. I did this segment at the end of last week's episode, and so what I want to do is just kind of open that up, and I will probably at some point have like a special additional episode that just has like just Ask James, because there were some good questions from last week that I didn't have time to answer. So with that, as always, I'd like to ask you to relax, relate, and resist. Thank you.
Too complex.